The single largest rezoning legislation to ever happen in our province is taking place this year, and it is going to affect literally hundreds of thousands of properties. Now, there's a fair amount of information out about this already. It's called the Plex Plan and how it's going to transform housing and who will benefit from this rezoning the most. But to further dissect this and really dive deep here on today's episode, we interview a developer who is at the forefront of this information, and he shares everything that you need to know about this multiplex plan, and if you should be considering being one of the first people to take advantage of it, or if maybe waiting could make more sense.
Bill Laidler is a past realtor, a current developer with over 500 units under construction, and someone who will be personally leveraging the Plex Plan to develop more housing. As the Plex Plan is poised to turn homeowners into civilian developers, Bill shares his thoughts on going at it alone versus partnering with professionals who can help you avoid pitfalls, invest capital into your project, and even pre-sell the homes you plan to build by reducing your risk even further.
This is an incredibly insightful episode that we are really excited to share with you. And just off the top here, if you are considering selling a property or an investment property, well, we've created an incredibly in-depth guide on how to prepare your property to sell for the highest price possible.
You get one chance to sell your home, and by doing a few fundamental improvements to your property, you can sell for top dollar. Providing you the most amount of money for your next home, or even better, a new home and some money on the side for the other great things in life, the guide is absolutely free. So to get your copy, visit thevancouverlife.com/top dollar and find out how we help people maximize the sale of their homes. Now, let's get to today's episode about the Plex Plan with our special guest, Bill Laidler.
Okay, and here we are. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today. To start off, can you share with our viewers a bit about yourself and, of course, the Laidler Group of companies?
Thank you for having me, Dan. I was a realtor for 7 years, from 2013 to 2020. In that time, sold over $500 million worth of real estate and purchased around $20 million worth of real estate investment properties. Started partnering with developers, and we have 500 units currently in construction or under development. And while we're working on the development company, we've launched Laidler Academy, which is partnering with 200 realtors across Greater Vancouver and the Fraser Valley to follow the same business model that I built, to be the resource for property rights, zoning, official community plans, and the directions for our cities. And we're excited to be growing that by another 150 agents by the end of this year under our Laidler Trusted program.
Let's get into the meat as to why we're here today, and that's to really touch on the multiplex plan. And with an extreme housing shortage crisis in our province, I mean, that's not new. The BC government has recently introduced sweeping legislation that will radically transform the zoning of single-family homes across the entire province. The intent, of course, is to increase density and allow people to build multifamily properties on what was historically land designated for just one family. So can you expand a little bit on this legislation and maybe what it's designed to do?
This is the boldest regulatory change we've seen in real estate since Vancouver was sold at auction in the early 1900s. Over 300,000 single-family homes are going to be moving to multiplexes, 4 units on one lot, as one phase of these regulatory announcements. The second phase is to add between 5,000 and 10,000 condo units, around 101 SkyTrain, West Coast Express, and bus exchanges. The third part of this announcement is the creation of a new amenity cost charge, which is a new mechanism for cities to charge development applications to fund future growth. This includes funding for swimming pools, rec centers, daycares, the services that are required for this increase in population.
Got it. This is massive, obviously. Like you touched on, it is pretty much the biggest we've seen, at least in our lifetimes. And I guess, can you share some of the specifics on what can be built, and maybe do this based on different lot sizes? If I have a 4,000 square foot lot compared to an acre, what's the difference of what can be built there?
The first step to seeing whether your property qualifies for a multiplex is to look whether you're part of Metro Vancouver's urban containment boundary. The urban containment boundary runs from West Vancouver, Tri-Cities, through the Fraser Valley, and ends at Abbotsford. If you're within the urban containment boundary and your property is over 3,000 square feet, the province is mandating for cities to allow you to build 4 units. If your property is the same size and within 400 meters of a major bus route, defined as a bus that goes every 15 minutes, the province is mandating the cities to allow for 6 units.
Okay, so that's clearly a significant shift away from one single family home. Are there exemptions for certain types of properties where this zoning will not apply to them specifically?
There are a number of exemptions to the multiplex zoning. First, ALR properties are excluded, industrial land is excluded. Then more broadly, properties that are not hooked up to city sewer or water are excluded. They're also excluded if they're over 1 acre in size, and if there's feasibility concerns, including unstable ground, environmental setbacks, or anything else that would cause potential harm to neighbors or neighboring properties. This doesn't include all of the exclusions. There are more exclusions listed within the provincial mandates. If you're looking for the full list, suggest you reach out to Dan. Dan has a list of everything you need to know about what properties are included and what properties are excluded, and he'll be one of the best resources for you.
Okay, that's good to know. So it does sound like the vast majority of properties will essentially fall under this rezoning then. And, if we're talking about feasibility and infrastructure, let's talk about parking. What do we know about what's being pushed down as far as parking regulations for these new multiplex homes?
The province is announcing no parking requirements are allowed to be required by cities for the 6-unit developments within 400 meters of a major bus route. There will be no parking requirements. The builders have the flexibility to add parking, but the cities cannot mandate it. The cities will have flexibility to have different parking requirements for the 4plexes outside of the 400 meters of the major bus routes, and maybe 1 stall per unit, but the province has left that in the city's hands, and it will be varied by city and could vary by neighborhood within each city.
I live in East Vancouver, and Dan and I both live in East Vancouver, and I can tell you right now that just about every street is already littered with cars. So the idea of leaving that up to cities, I think is interesting, but I think that parking is going to be a big issue if builders don't build parking. I could see that becoming an even bigger issue than perhaps it already is. As we look at maybe some of the details of this plan, I don't think, or I should say, this isn't a plan that was conceived here. This is actually a model that has been looked at and I guess implemented in other parts of the world, specifically New Zealand. They announced a similar redevelopment model, 10 years ago. Can you maybe discuss what that impact has been like there? Because I think that's the main sort of model that Vancouver has been looking at specifically.
UBC provided a report along with the provincial announcements that looked at the example where Auckland in New Zealand made a similar move towards multiplexes on single-family properties. And what was seen in Auckland was there being a drop in the median and average price points for properties across all housing types. When you look at condos, townhomes, and single-family, the average price point dropped, which is the main intention of these regulations, to create more townhomes at lower price points for families and for the lower price point in the market to have access to. At the same time, they also saw that single family homes prices rose in the same period, likely reflecting this increased development potential. So we had single family home prices rise and median prices level out and drop.
I've got a bit of a follow-up question to that just kind of come to me. When they did that study, was Auckland or New Zealand specifically experiencing the same kind of immigration changes that we're experiencing? Because I think it's one thing to, if you stabilize your population base and you create more supply, theoretically the price of that asset would come down. But if we continue to, I guess, outsupply the market with demand, are we really going to see a curb in pricing, or hopefully are we just going to see more supply of units and maybe less volatile pricing over the years to come?
There will be short-term opportunities. Will provide buyers more options to enter into the marketplace. I generally agree with you that we have an open and unlimited, seemingly, amount of demand for Vancouver. And if we built to allow for 20 million people to come to Vancouver, I believe 20 million people would come to Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
Shanghai is of this size, and Vancouver is one of the most desirable places to live in the world. And as long as we have housing, there will be people who either migrate here from other parts of Canada or will find a way to immigrate here. So
Yeah.
I don't see prices dropping, but having more supply and having more options for homeowners and allowing more people to come will become more available, which brings us to the main question, which nobody's talking about, is how many people do we want to have in Greater Vancouver?
That is a
What
question.
are we building towards? Are we just building more housing for more housing, or we have a target to be a 5 million person city, a 10 million person city? And then how can we plan our infrastructure and our investments outside of housing to accommodate for those targets?
That's a very good question. Very good question. Dan, I know you were about to interject there.
Yeah. No, I had the answer, but it just eluded me there. No, thanks for sharing that. And no, it's a very good perspective to have, of course, right? Because you're right. Right now, we're just building to build, as are most cities around the world. But perhaps there are some other areas to model after essentially having a bit of a cap, or at least an annualized cap, saying, yeah, we can sustain X amount of growth per year, not just sort of open doors. So, not an answer that is created overnight, but one that, let's hope, somebody at a high level is considering thinking about now.
I was just going to say, Dan, I'm not sure who answers that question either. Is that a question for the mayor? Is that a question for the province? Is that a question for the immigration minister? Is that a question for Canadians? It's a fantastic question, Bill. And I can tell you from the conversations I've had, which have been vast and many, that's never been addressed.
I agree. And it came from the idea of Port Moody. Port Moody currently is a 33,000 person city. And with these housing announcements, we could grow to 100,000 people. Where have we had the discussion on how big Port Moody wants to be? And has that come into any of the discussion?
Well, a very, very politicized question. And because you're going to have the NIMBYs of the world who are going to say, hey, listen, we're all 33,000 is already enough. And then you're going to have, people who come here for new opportunity who say, it's nothing like the rest of the world and you guys need to expand. So it's a question, and as a nation of immigrants, it's a very delicate question. And I would love to have more discourse on that.
Yeah, one thing we also saw with this plan, the idea, of course, is to even increase density further around mass transit, around our SkyTrain stations, et cetera. So if we're getting, let's say, 4 to 6 units on a lot, sort of as a blanket rule, what can you share about sort of what might the future look like as far as densifications and buildings around high transit areas?
The province have identified 104 transit-oriented areas, which includes SkyTrain stations, West Coast Express, and the major bus exchanges. They've tiered the development to be the highest within 200 meters of the TOA, then dropping down to 8 stories within 800 meters of the TOA. So to give you an example, the 8-story development is at a minimum 3 FSR. So if you had a 10,000 square foot lot, the minimum building size would be 30,000 square feet. Approximately 31,000 square foot units per lot. And it goes up to a 5 FSR within 200 meters of SkyTrain. That same 10,000 square foot lot would have 50,000 square foot units, or after you take off efficiencies, 850 square foot units. So we're talking about adding between 30 and 50 condo units to every 10,000 square feet property within 800 meters of those TOAs.
Dramatic.
So sounds like building towards a Shanghai. That's what it sounds like. To answer your former question.
Well, when we looked at it, 104 TOAs, and it's somewhere between 5 and 10,000 units per TOA.
Wow.
So we're looking at building approximately 1 million new homes around those 104 transit hubs.
To add to the, I guess, the political questions here, and this is a hypothetical, though it's coming out because I think there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered with respect to the multiplex plan. But there will be communities where this will be highly unpopular, say Shaughnessy, Point Grey, places like that. And I suspect we'll see some form of defense coming up in terms of, hey, we want to keep these, I know there's a heritage component, and maybe we can touch on that. But so maybe some, I think, pre-existing covenants. But do you see a way of homeowners kind of finding a loophole within this where they could protect themselves from this redevelopment potential in say places like Shaughnessy, where they've got one house sitting on a quarter of an acre?
This is an interesting question, and the province has specifically addressed the idea of covenants. And covenants are agreements between private property owners agreeing to how the properties are going to develop. So most typically, and a good example is in White Rock, there have been covenants registered on title that will limit the building heights below what the city allows to protect view corridors and to protect view sightlines. We have also seen covenants in subdivisions in the Tri-Cities where the original developer limited the number of units per property to one to maintain single family character in those neighborhoods. And the province has acknowledged that covenants between property owners are outside of the scope of these provincial announcements. The province addressed that the cities cannot force property owners through development applications to add additional covenants to work around these regulations. But it seems like at this point in time that property owners are still able to negotiate between each other to put restrictions on their properties. Now, this is a voluntary restriction and will require all the property owners in a subdivision or in an area to voluntarily put that restriction in place. But there could be an argument that with all of the single family homes moving towards multiplexes, there will be a higher demand on single family homes, and that by protecting your home from the subdivisions, you're creating a scarce or rare property type that will accelerate its value faster.
That's how I see it.
Got it. So, I mean, expanding a bit here on pushback, like what do we know, if anything, if there's going to be certain cities or municipalities who are just like, no, this isn't for us, and they, I don't know, want to take it to the courts or whatnot, like how much is the province going to kind of bully this and push this down and enforce it? And I guess that follow-up question would be like, do they have the capacity to do so? Like, do they have people that will come and say like, no, I'm now your rezoning sheriff of town, like what do we know what that might look like?
The province has been foreshadowing this, right, by publishing the naughty list that we've seen come out in the news articles. And the way that these bylaws have been written is to reserve the rights from the province to step in and enforce these bylaws. It seems to me like the province is committed at a high level to ensuring that the cities implement these plans, and they have the mechanisms in place and have already thought about how they're going to take over control from cities who are not implementing fast enough or in a way that the province sees fit. Now, one part of the announcements that we haven't discussed is the provincial requirement for cities to do a housing needs report. Each city has to do a housing needs report by the end of 2024, the end of this year. And what I expect is that there will be some loosening of these requirements by the time we get to that housing needs report, as long as the cities are growing in line with the mechanisms or the metrics that the province are putting forward with how many units they want to see in each community. I've been skeptical, although getting more and more confident that this is going to happen. But if there is an out or if there is leeway, I see it being with cities meeting the targets in the housing needs report and the province is in agreement with those growth targets.
Okay, so it's been somewhat thought out, and I do like the idea of sort of the city reports, right, and trying to meet those housing needs. And so far, we've largely been talking about sort of Vancouver, but as this is a provincial wide legislation, maybe we kind of put a bit of focus on a smaller area or a northern area or interior, and just kind of hypothetically say, so let's say, I don't know, Prince George, Parksville, something like that. Maybe a sixplex isn't going to be highest and best use, but can you see them utilizing the plan and maybe all of a sudden duplexes or triplex become sort of the highest and best and most popular housing type for, that kind of population sized area?
I can see these fourplexes and sixplexes becoming more popular across all cities all over BC. There is more flexibility already for cities outside of Metro Vancouver's urban containment boundary. So, for example, Abbotsford is outside of Vancouver's urban containment boundary, and they have more flexibility to set their own urban containment boundary on where they want to see these duplexes, where they want to see these multiplexes, and they are not required to rezone every single family property. Similarly, if the population of the city is under 5,000 people, they're excluded from these mandates.
It's interesting, Bill, because when we talk about, the fact that a single family home, if it's protected, if you will, under a covenant or a group of covenants or something to that effect, arguably, if this really takes off and we start to see a lot of multiplexes getting built, I would venture to say that things like even duplexes or triplexes would rise in value comparatively speaking to, say, a 6-unit development. Would you agree with that, or do you think that there's just a segment of the marketplace that is getting captured by that sort of asset class, and it won't really change too much, and really we need to be providing more housing for more people, even if that is smaller units?
As real estate agents, supply and demand, as there's no more supply or lower supply of duplexes, there will be more desirable, they will be larger, and there will be people who move to it. But it is that question, and we've all seen it, there's a ceiling in each city where buyers just don't like to go above. In the Tri-Cities, like once you hit 1.5 million, the market growth drops significantly. And it's going to be the same with duplexes. Once they hit some threshold, they'll become less desirable and people will move into the smaller spaces or into the multiplexes or sixplexes because the gross price points are more affordable. I'm a supporter of living in smaller units. Our latest development, Sitka House, was built for entry-level condos. Many of them were studios between 400 and 450 square feet. And it opened up housing to people who haven't been able to invest into the real estate market. And one of the best examples we have is a 60-year-old first-time home buyer that moved out from Vancouver.
Wow.
Bought one of the 400 square foot studios and lives an active lifestyle. She's using that studio, or what we hear is she's using that studio to sleep and live, and then we'll be out the trails walking around and using all the outdoor amenities and nature that we have here. So it's a pretty special story, and I see our communities moving more and more that way, where we're going to create more public gathering spaces and people will spend less time in their homes entertaining and more time outside of their homes in entertainment type locations.
Yeah, that is a great story. Thanks for sharing that. We love hearing that. And in real estate, we get so many of these. You know what I mean? I've got an 18-year-old who commuted 3 hours each way for years to buy his first house, and he did with zero help from the family. And he bought a studio, and then 3-4 years later, I bought him into a 2-bed. And he's doing it all on his own, and he's just doing it from working hard and grinding and having that vision. So yeah, another question here. So I'm kind of picturing this. So the legislation, it goes through, it's enacted at the end of June here. And then we've got all these single family homeowners. And let's say you're sitting on a Vancouver special, I don't know, 50 odd years old, whatnot, and it's free and clear. And you're looking at this new option and going, okay, well, let's say I could sell it today. And let's say it's worth $2 million and there's no mortgage on it. Great. Okay. You have one chance to sell that. You get your, $2 million gross. Or you're looking at this and going, well, what if I built, let's say 6 units? Let's say they're allowed to build 6, and it's going to cost $2 to $3 million to do that. But on the other side of that, they're actually going to net an additional $1 million, let's say. So like, oh man, I really want to retire. An extra $1 million looks really good to me right now. But maybe they don't have $2 to $3 million cash on them to do this project. Is this ultimately going to create like syndication groups or companies that are essentially bringing in the capital and the builders and the architects and whatnot and saying, look, this is cookie cutter. We're going to become equity owners and we're going to basically turn your $2 million into $3 million for you. And it's going to take 2 years, blah, blah, blah. Do you kind of see what I'm saying here? Like, is this going to open up almost a whole new industry here in the province?
This is going to empower homeowners to be part of the development process. And for any homeowner who is exploring in a partnership with a builder developer, Laidler Developments are actively seeking opportunities along with a number of our other clients, Silverleaf Homes, Lightwell Developments, and partnering with agents like yourself, Dan. Anyone who's listening to this, reach out to Dan so that Dan can introduce myself and our clients to them so that they can take advantage of these opportunities. It will happen, and that's why we're so excited about our Laidler Trusted program and working with agents like yourself, Dan, so that you can work with your clients, see if it's the right fit for them, and bring in these opportunities.
Makes sense to me. I see, the process of development is unknown to the vast majority, I think, of homeowners. And I think there's also this misconception around developers that they're just out there for profits. And I think they don't understand the risk involved. And there's a lot of things that I think this would open up their eyes to. And open up their eyes to the difficulty of providing new housing supply in this marketplace.
One of the most exciting opportunities about these partnerships with homeowners and developers is the opportunity to pre-sell the end unit before a shovel goes in the ground. Mm-hmm. It's risky to go through the construction process, but if the homeowner is willing to partner with us or another developer to bring the project to a development permit approval, which means we have the building plans approved, we go out there and we find the end users who want to purchase those units, and then the homeowner exits the project. They have created a significant amount of value that construction companies will purchase, and will purchase at very slim margins because it's been de-risked, and construction crews are always looking to keep their workers moving, and shovel in the ground projects are what they will pay the most for.
Mm-hmm. Very good point. Very good point. Speaking to what those guys can build, I guess some of the major questions that we still have yet to answer around this new legislation are things like you talked about, the amenity cost charge, the final FSR. What are we actually going to be able to build to? What are our limits? And are we going to be able to actually sell these, or are they going to be rental purpose built? And I think some of that's still up for debate. How do you see that evolving?
The details that City is going to implement, including the floor space ratio, how big the buildings will be, whether they can be stratified or held as rentals, has been left in the hands of the cities. Mm-hmm. Similar to what we've talked about before, the province has put their own preference in the policy documents, which is to ensure that these homes get built. And the province has maintained the flexibility to step in and mandate certain regulations if they feel like the cities are making it too difficult to move forward, and especially if the province sees that it's being made difficult on purpose to distract or deter these types of developments. So it's going to be interesting to see which parts of the cities have stratification, which parts are going to be secured rentals, and how big they'll be depending on the location. It's one of the major questions that we're waiting to answer, that we're waiting to hear.
I'll certainly share my opinion. I think, leaving it open to the marketplace, in my opinion, makes the most sense, right? If it's clamped down and says, okay, no, you can only build to rent, well, there's going to be a smaller buyer pool for these, or people who actually want to invest in that. Where on the flip side, if you say it's up to you what you do with your property and the units there, well, guess what? They're going to build 6, let's say. They're going to sell 3, they're going to live in 1, and they're going to rent 2. because that's what the demand dictates, excuse me. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, if you open up the potential ultimate developer capabilities here, I think you're going to ultimately just bring more product to market. And if there's enough product to market, well, then the market decides where the highest and best value is there, right? I can decide to sell, or I can decide to rent. And anyway, that's what I hope they
I agree.
they pay attention to.
That's what the province has laid out as their preference. So I imagine that majority of these will be stratified and be able to be sold.
Fantastic. Okay. Do we know what's the timeline for all this? Like when do they have to have these answered, the cities, and when is this going to be enacted? When can we put a shovel in the ground, essentially?
The cities have until June 30th to update their zoning bylaws. After updating their zoning bylaws, there's no rezoning process. Developers go straight to development permit, the form and character, the exterior look of the building, then move forward to the building plan application, which is conforming with the BC Building Code. I would expect, even with all of the urgency around this, that it will take until well into 2025 before any of the shovels are in the ground.
So I'm going to ask a question here, which we've already kind of touched on a little bit. So I'm going to combine this question. First of all, I guess the first part of the question is, is it realistic to expect civilian developers to know about how to go about this process? And I think that's largely been answered. It's largely no, and such why we should be. If you are looking to redevelop, you should be partnering with experts or professionals in the field to get you there. I guess, though, if someone has a property whereby the density can be increased, but they've never gone about the process, what piece of advice would you give them in terms of expectation, the kind of risk that they might be taking, the sort of partnership that they should be looking for, that kind of thing? What piece of advice would you give them?
You identified the first main warning for anyone who's looking to develop, who hasn't developed in the past. Partner with someone who has done it before. And when I was selling real estate, I had to work with many clients and unfortunately break the news to them that the developer buying their property is going to restart the plans because they designed plans that were not buildable. And I was guilty of this myself early in my career when I was starting my development business and had no experience knowing what I was doing. I wasted a lot of time and money making mistakes that had to be redone after I learned I'd made those mistakes. So first, partner with somebody with experience. Second, what can you expect? Depends on how you structure the deal. So that the least risky way to structure the deal is through a general partner, limited partner structure where the investor without the experience isn't signing on the debt, is not taking the $5, $10, $15 million personal guarantee. You have the general partner that's taking the liability of the loan, and the only money that's at risk is the financial investment. Again, would not recommend. Many people partner all the way through construction because there is so many things can happen in the construction part. If you're going to partner, look at partnering through the development permit and building permit stage and then exiting or leaving just your profit in through the construction so that you're maintaining your investments or you're maintaining your retirement plan or whatever other uses you have for that money.
Also, I'm very curious about timing. So, Bill, let's pretend I'm your client today. I've got a nice little 4,000 square foot lot in East Van. And I say, look, I know this thing's coming. Do we start planning this now so that on July 1st, we can start building? Or do we want to kind of let the dust settle and see some other people go first and maybe they'll fall victim to the pitfalls while, we don't want to be an early adopter? Or do we want to be an early adopter and beat the potential landslide of people that are coming down behind us, and being first to market has its benefits? Like what do you kind of advise to your clients now?
I have a property that I'm planning on building one of these multiplexes on in Coquitlam, and I'm waiting until we have the clarity from the city hall before starting the design process. And then I'm going to go. I'm going to work to be first to market. I'm going to work to be one of the first ones in that neighborhood that all the buyers who can't afford the $1.8 million home will be the only option at a lower price point. I don't expect that we're going to be I don't expect we're going to be flooded with inventory. When we look at Vancouver that had their multiplex zoning adopted in September of 2023, there have only been 19 applications in the last 6 months. Because the approval process is one part of the development process. The second part is finding the construction teams and finding the construction teams who can build it at a price that will still allow the project to be profitable. And the more of these multiplexes that are approved, the more demand there will be on the construction crews, which will cause construction costs to rise and potentially projects no longer to be feasible and will limit the supply back down again. So until the construction crews and there are enough people to build all these multiplexes, I don't see an overrun of supply happening in a short period of time.
Got it. I could see, with huge demand too, let's be honest, there's going to be some suppliers in the network here who are maybe not bringing a high quality product to market, because it's going to be a bit of a gold rush potentially. So I think people are going to have to be very cognizant of who they're working with. And it's not going to be people that are maybe just fresh to market or they're just rushing through projects to get to the next one, because quality is going to be obviously incredibly important here.
We've seen that in the single family home. As real estate agents, we can spot those homes fairly quickly.
Very true.
I'm sure the buyers can too.
Often, but often not. So,
yeah.
We're definitely here to help guide. Ryan, any follow-up questions here before we cap off?
Ultimately, Bill, I think you covered a lot of what I think is important to, potential or would-be syndicate investors here, and potentially future, what Dan and I have kind of dubbed civilian developers on our podcast here. And I think it's very important, if you are considering doing something like this, to walk along with someone who's done it before. I've spent 10 years in construction myself as a construction project manager. And people have asked me, what was that like? And I explained to people that, construction is a lot like going to war with your enemy, but you can't kill them. You just wake up every day and you beat the hell out of each other and you try again the next day. And construction's difficult and you don't know what you're going to find. And so, the piece of advice of taking, I think, the development in a syndicate to the development stage and then exiting, I think is a fabulous idea and something that I think people should pay special attention to.
Perfect. Yep. Keep the scary stuff with the professionals until you don't have to step on the landmines. Well, Bill, this has been incredibly informative, and it's so great to talk to someone who is on the forefront of this, because it is clearly a massive change, and there are going to be people who, like yourself, are going to stay educated, stay on the forefront, and be able to advise accordingly. So for anyone who has been listening and they either want to learn more about you and the multiplex plan or realtors in the academy, what is the best way to find you?
Best way to find us is at www.laidlertrusted.com, and you'll find one of the 36 realtors across Greater Vancouver and the Fraser Valley who are working with us every week on understanding exactly what the opportunities are, and speaking with the 1,100 builders that I developed relationships with over my 7-year career to ensure that homeowners are either selling for the best pricing with the right strategy, or if you're buyers, you're avoiding those major pitfalls that are going to affect your development potential. So the easiest way is to reach out to Dan. Dan and I have partnered up, and I'm excited to work with you and expand your service offering within this community. And any of the other Laidler trusted agents will do the same.
Brilliant. Well, as always, thank you so much for your time. It has been incredibly insightful, and we look forward to evolving this. And we will definitely have you back on maybe post June 30th as the ink dries, and we can kind of get into some specifics here and how this evolves, as it is the biggest sweeping legislation change we've seen in BC's history when it comes to zoning. Thanks as always, and we'll see you here next week. Bye.
Thank you.